Hi everyone, Mary Mitchell here. So I'm starting with the end first because I just want to get that part in the beginning, because we're always in such a rush. We tend to, skip through things. I do it too. We all do it. It's just the nature of what it is. I just want to say how important it is that we all do things differently, and to keep it in your mind when you're watching this what you might have done. He's not even nearly finished. This is a blue heron, and I'll explain how I did it. Bye. I hope I explained myself well enough. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. If you have comments for somebody who's reading the comments, not even for me, but hey, I did that, but I did it this way, or I did it that way, it would be really appreciated. This is not, this is sharing, and this is passing it along, and this is sharing our knowledge and passing our knowledge, or our lack of knowledge, and reaching out to one another to make ourselves better. So that's the whole point of this. Something in me just wants to share what I've learned from all the people that have taught me on YouTube. And just to give you a little bit of background before I close this particular video is, when I was a teenager, I enrolled in fine arts, and I dropped out. I just didn't want to do it. And then 30 years later, I just decided I couldn't sleep one night, and I started to draw again. And from there, it's been pouring out of me. And if it wasn't for YouTube, because I can't get back into the classroom, I just don't have the time or anything like that. If it wasn't for YouTube, there's been so many accomplishments made, so many techniques. I wouldn't even know about acrylic pouring if it wasn't for YouTube, on Facebook, things like that. YouTube. It's YouTube where I first learned about that. So here's where we begin, and here is my intro. Thank you for joining, guys, and I'll talk to you soon, and please consider subscribing. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. Mary Mitchell here. Good to be back. I have to apologize. I got a piece of hair sticking up there. I broke my promise. I didn't mean to, but this picture, let me lower it so you can see it. So I wanted to show you how I was going to go about transferring a photograph that my husband had taken onto this canvas after I had applied the entire canvas 36 by 36 with silver leaf. I'm not done yet. I have a long way to go. But the first thing I did, I'm going to take you through the process of how I've gotten this far, and from here on, I will record it. The best is yet to come, because I still have to lay in all the detail, which is really important. But also important is what I learned. I've never painted on any kind of metal leafing. Now, this is imitation silver leaf, and I've never painted on it before. I had to seal it first, and it was interesting to see the way the paint reacted to the canvas. And then I made a decision that the best thing to do, as most painters do, is they block the colors in first. But I blocked them in with gesso, and I tainted, I colored the gesso. I tainted it with the acrylic paint that was not close enough. I didn't want it to be exact, because that comes after this. The first thing I wanted to do was lay down the gesso, get the bird, the heron, this is a blue heron, transferred onto this canvas. I'm going to show you how I did it. It's not magic. It's called a proportional divider. This is really, it took me a lot of time. It took me a lot of time to get this bird to scale, this heron to scale, proportionally, I mean. I'm going to keep this painting very, very simple. In fact, the photograph is very simple, and the photograph is actually right up here. This is it on an 8.5 by 11, or is it 8 by 11.5, whatever. Anyway, it's a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, I think it is. And I Googled on YouTube, although I can draw, I don't do it a lot, let me put it that way. But I do it well enough that I can manage this and have it come out decent, and other things. But anyway, I've never really concentrated so much on doing a subject. Usually I just use my eye, and see if it makes sense up here in my brain. But this time I really wanted it to be very, very close. Other people can probably whip this up there. This is not a drawing lesson, so I just wanted to tell you that this was what I did, because you're going to see me do some measuring and how I transferred this, and I sketched this onto the canvas, how I began, how I ended up doing the legs, which were ironically the hardest part. The legs were the hardest part. Now go figure that. Okay, they're still not done, and I can still see some things I need to fix, but it's gessoed in and I can do whatever I want at this point. The rest of it, I'm going to be applying new silver leafing in a different pattern, and I'm really excited about that because the new silver leaf that I bought is much shinier, this brand. So I'm really excited to get that on there, but I'm not doing that until the painting is finished. So although I do a lot of pours on my channel, this is dedicated to only brushwork. There's no pouring on this whatsoever, as far as, paint pouring, fluid painting like that. This is brushwork only, and if you're interested to see how I got this on here and where I go from this point on, and how I got to this point, and then watch me paint in from that point on, I'd love to have you aboard. And I will be taking a break every so often to do other things like pour, and I have a couple things I need framed, although I think I have enough framing videos out there. But anyway, I'm glad that I hope you're here. I hope you're joining me with this, and I hope you can see where we go from here. And I will be right back. Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm back, and this is going to be me explaining to you how I got this far. So on my phone, I have a photograph of a picture that my husband took of a blue heron. I Googled the best way to get the proportions that were true to the subject, and so here's the photo, blown up on a piece of letter paper portrait, 8.5 by 11, got that right. And it's quite beautiful. It's a beautiful bird. And he takes beautiful pictures. I'm just going to do a plug for him because right now he's working on my website, and I'm also trying to encourage him to pursue his photography. He's good. He's so good. And he just has no idea. He's got such a good eye. So that's a plug for my husband, Andrew Mitchell. But the level of detail on the actual photograph itself, he's got a very good camera, is just mind-blowing. But so anyway, let me show you now how I did this, okay? So what I did is I took this 8.5 by 11, and I decided how much of this canvas I wanted to fill up. This is a 36 by 36. So I took a piece of poster board, that I'm going to get for you. And I did like sort of a mock-up. Well, no, it's not sort of a mock-up, it is a mock-up. And I did it about how I kind of took this and I decided, yeah, it's about how I want it to go. And, I can tweak it here and there. But I wanted the subject to be present, but I really wanted this part of the canvas also, which is silver leaf, to stand out as well, not take over, but to complement the subject. So I'm going to be finessing that last. So right now I have to put all the detail on this bird. So what I did is I began with this. I divided it up into segments. I looked on YouTube and I decided this is the way for me to do it. I have a proportional divider that I mentioned in the intro. And you have to remember with these things to keep it on. There's several settings, and I picked how big I wanted it. So, say for example, about like this, maybe a little less. And so that should translate to the photo, which it does. I have some work to do on the legs, but you can see that if I go like to the top to, let's take it to the waterline, for example. Okay, about the middle. And you just want to make sure that this is tight. So you go to the waterline and then to the top of his head. And this is actually perfect. So I'll show it to you. I hope I don't. So we have to the waterline, to the top of his head. So that's pretty good, right? Don't you love it? I was like, yes, I can do this. And that's how I started, is I divided this up into segments, and so that I could transfer it onto here. And then, in theory, what I had in my mind is that I would then trace over this with tracing paper, tack it up here, and then put some transfer paper underneath and transfer it on that way. So I started to take this and draw in parts of him starting with the top. So first I knew how tall he would be. So I marked, actually I started on here, so I marked it on here and I made all my markings. I just kept measuring with this and transferring to this with the big end. This transfers to this. So I just kept going through the whole thing and just measure, and I kept checking my measurements and rechecking my measurements. And sometimes you're like, how did I get that wrong? Sometimes you just have to make sure that you're on the same, where you start. If you start sliding this around, your measurements are going to be different because this changes. But if I move this, you can make this bigger or smaller by adjusting this, is the long and short of it. Okay, so again, this isn't a class on drawing or how to use proportional dividers, but this is the gist of it. And you're going to keep going back and forth and back and forth. This is a pretty good one, Derwent, I guess it's called. But I want to get a better one that's more precise. It's too thick. The tips it gets the job done, but the tips are very thick. Too thick, the wood. So I want to get one that's metal, that has points that I can get really, really exact on. So I'm going to order one of those. But in the meantime, this was great. It's just a bang-up job. Just measure, and just it's not going to be exact. That's okay. You can get it as close as you want, as close as you can. I took some tracing paper, 8 by 11, and I tore out about 4 sheets. And this is a mess because the tape was all over the place. Turns out that not only is leafing a little difficult to draw on, but it's also doesn't like to hold tape. And I didn't want tape that was going to pull on the silver leafing either. So I traced. I taped this to my let's call this my model, okay? And I just traced them. Okay, now I made some adjustments, so this is a little different because I had to keep adjusting. You can see I ran out of room on the tracing paper for the beak and like that. But I knew that once I put it on here, I could, have it go out further. So I wasn't worried about that. You don't want to run out of room on your canvas, but on here it was okay to run out of a little bit of room here because I had all of this to work with. So I ran out of a little bit of room on that part. Anyway, so I traced him onto here, and then I put this here. I tried to tack it up as best as I could where I wanted him to go. Okay, and the legs I had to adjust a lot. So anyway, I tacked this up. It didn't have any gesso on it. This has a base of colored gesso. I tinted the gesso because the paint, I'm using acrylics, and it's interesting to see how the paint interacted with the leafing, and something just said to me, you need to block in the colors with gesso, colored gesso. Tint your gesso with the colors that are close to it, and then paint on top of that. So that's what I did. But before then, I took what's called transfer paper. Now this I ordered a very long time ago, and I only used it once, and then I went, okay. So it also comes in different colors. It comes in graphite, I guess it's called, yeah, white, blue, yellow, and red. So I took some tracing paper, some of this transfer paper, and very carefully I lined it up with this, okay, and then I know this is really down and dirty, guys, but work with me. And then you can see I cut it up, but anyway. And then I went over this. It's really a mess because I'm done with using this, so it's been handled. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we'll just put it right up here. So this was covered for the most part, except down here. Line it up a little better. See, do you see how it keeps falling off? It's crazy. So I put the transfer paper underneath, and then I took this from my drawing kit. Here it goes. So this was, I'm not making a very strong case for this method. And then I took this and I went over it with this. It's not a pencil, it's not a pen, it's a smudging tool. I forget what it's called, but and I went over. And there he was, outlined in yellow. That's why I wish I had graphite, but yellow was all I had. So that is what I did. I had most of them on here. That was enough, and then I worked with the photograph, and I stopped with this. It was really getting to be. Look at this. It was really a mess, but it worked. So I was, like I said, I get something in my head, and I just run for it. And if there's a better way, by all means, do it whatever way which works. I can see from here what I need to do. I can see some adjustments that need to be made, but I'm happy with what's here for now. And now I'll take it from here and go from here. Okay, so having said that like 100 times, after I got them on here, and I was having a little bit of difficulty before I put the gesso on, drawing and erasing and changing lines and like that. It was resisting some of the graphite, it was resisting some of the erasers that I had, using a dark pencil, a soft pencil, something that wouldn't puncture it, not a fine point. The higher the number on a pencil, the softer the pencil. I went up to 6B. I had put some paint on here before I blocked in the gesso, and because I wanted to see how it would look, and I loved it. But the paint, I think it could have been because of the sealant. I think maybe, perhaps, but it was. I could still see some of the silver, and I said, well, that would be an interesting effect. But there's parts that I don't want that to, and I don't want to have to keep going over with the paint. So it was logical to me to use the gesso, and the only thing I wasn't certain about is if I wanted all of this blocked in. And then once I started to do it, I said, yeah, that's the way to go. And then I can decide how much, when I go to redefine the silver leaf, how much of this I'll end up covering. I took the world's greatest gesso, according to Jerry's Artarama. It's their own brand, and it's super gesso. I put some in here, which is a wet palette. It's a Masterson wet palette. This thing was a game changer for me. It saved me so much money on paint and waste on paint, and even brush painting. You know, they talk about waste. Even brush painting, you can waste a lot of paint. So I try this. You can save this in here, and I think in one of my videos I mentioned it, for weeks, and it will stay. It won't get moldy. It will stay fine as long as, you know, it's not under the blazing hot sun. It's still wet. I just bought a new sponge, and if it starts to dry, you just spritz it again. That's all. So anyway, so I have what I did is I put the gesso down and my colors, and I blocked it all in. At any rate, that is how I got that far. I took my gesso and I blocked in my colors, and then I went around it because I just was trying to gauge how far I wanted to go around. I don't like the pattern. This is my first go at silver leafing, and I didn't care for you could see, and a lot of them you can see the blocks, you know, the squares, but it's a bit messy. So I'm going to redo that, and it's going to be, I'm happy to do that because like I think I said the new silver leaf that I have is much shinier. So the long part comes now is with me painting this guy, this blue heron, and making him into this as best as I can do, and that's where we're going to pick up